things that I want to talk about, and I left this up from the previous classes this week. So this probably looks a little confusing. What we were talking about is how we attract our relationships. So I talked a lot about relationships this week, and again, part of that societal, historical, anthropological, sociological contributing factor. So this is something that I see happen often. So society, of course, feeds our belief, right? That there's negative emotions. There are no negative emotions. They're all just info. So this is in regard to the belief around anger. So what we try to do as human beings or anything in our environment is we try to find balance, homeostasis, right? So our environment is trying to do that right now. But when things are very out of balance, something has to take place to bring that back into balance. And that is not always comfortable. That's not always a comfortable ride. In fact, quite the contrary. It's pretty uncomfortable. So we will see, let's say that the earth is trying to maintain its balance. We will see a lot of natural disasters to try and rectify that, or pandemics, things like that. As human beings, when we're trying to find our balance, we will attract the opposite. So person X takes on this belief system, right? That you need to be calm, you need to be codependent, you need to be nice, I want to fix things, and I suppress and avoid things. And then person Y is angry, blows up, expresses, pokes at person X because they want some type of interaction, right? They want something to be addressed. So they're facing that. So what happens is this person attracts this person, and you'll see it. So this person will say that they're calm, this person will blow up, and what they're doing is they're trying to find a balance through that experience, through that exchange, through that interaction. Anybody familiar with this in their own lives?
Yeah.
It can be frustrating because if you're this person and you're trying to get this person to bring up their anger and to address that belief, it can look like domestic violence. It can look like drama, as people like to say. It can look like quite a bit of conflict. And society promotes this. So this takes us into the next part of avoidance. Because so many people, would you mind passing me those cards? So many people avoid, right? And I was working with a teenager this week, and I was trying to get her to see how she avoids and how most people avoid. And they don't even realize they're avoiding. In order for us to have effective communication, to talk, we have to be vulnerable. And that's scary for people because that requires people to confront their shadow. And they don't like to do that. Because some people, don't want to admit they have a shadow. Why do you think that is? Why do you think some people don't want to admit they have a shadow?
Same concept of you don't want to look in the mirror and see your own problems, I guess.
Yeah, it's easier to clean up somebody else's house than it is to go clean your own sometimes, right? To fix other people's things, which is just a distraction. So it's like there's a train station. And this is what people do in their lives. So there's a main station. So here's the station. The station involves personal responsibility, vulnerability, communication, work, school, all of our responsibilities. And when people don't like this, They say, no, I don't like this. Even though this is the only route to happiness, they create all these other tracks to avoid. And all these tracks lead to dead ends. Every single one of them is a dead end. So I was working with this teenager, and I've been working with this teenager and her mom for a while, and they come in yelling. They're screaming, cursing at one another, and all of it is because the mom is frustrated. She makes good points, and she just doesn't know how to get it across to her daughter that she's frustrated. And so I tried to get her daughter to see, you create all these distractions so that you can miss the train station. And she said, well, what's the train station? And I said, well, I don't know, you're a senior and you have 8 credits and you're supposed to have 24, so school is at the station. And she doesn't want to help her mom with anything in the house. So she goes out into the neighborhood and she's like, I gotta watch these kids, but nobody asked her to watch those kids. I gotta, my friend is having some issues and I gotta go talk to my friend. I have to sleep. I have to play video games. All of those are dead ends. And we create them. In fact, I'm a believer, this is just my personal belief, I don't know that people can learn things in one lifetime. So I think there might be some truth to we incarnate here several times, and that this is the actual meaning of death, is you keep going to dead ends and you get sent back. Try again, try again, try again, until you get it. And then you finally get it, and you don't have to go through that process anymore. And this is going to lead me into some things about relationships. So we have so many dead ends. So we have addictions. Being in other people's business. Being on our cell phones and social media. Sleeping, shopping. Can you guys think of some others? Everything that avoids. Yelling, so you don't have stonewalling, so you don't have to listen. People pleasing. All these things, lying, telling stories, observing without interacting. This is a big social media thing. Anything else you can think of?
Good working potentially, like if you want to.
Working too much as an avoidance, being disengaged. So all these things lead to dead ends. I used to tell my students, because I used to teach in the behavior program at Sandia High School, and when they don't want to do something, they do other things, right? So they want to avoid their work either because it's too hard, and they want to avoid this, right? I can't do it. They don't want to say I can't do it. I need help. So they lay down on the ground, yell and stonewall, have fits, go out and pick me a flower and say, here, I picked you a flower. I say, I didn't ask you for a flower. I asked you to do your assignment. You know, that's thoughtful of you, but really, is it genuine, or are you trying to get out of doing something? You're trying to get out of doing something. So they pick all these tracks to go down, and that's what I told this one client. I said, you pick all these tracks to go down, and you miss the station. And that's why you're behind, and that's why you're not taking personal responsibility. Playing victim. That's a big one. That's like the longest track. People love that one. That's their favorite. That's the one I see the most. Well, I have this pain and I have that pain and people don't understand and I can't get it done. You know, we're all broken in some way. We all have some pain, but that doesn't mean that we don't address it. Those are just tracks that lead to dead ends. I mean, can you think in your own life of examples where you've done that? Yeah, it happens often. But this is the only true way to happiness. So I've also been working with, I work a lot with couples. So there's been a pendulum swing in our culture, if you're aware of it. So we talked about the internet coming out in 1995, right? You know, relationships before marriages, right? What were marriages built on in the past, do you think? What do you think marriages have been built on?
Lies.
Because there has to be a foundation of something, right? There has to be a foundation to build from.
I would say social control or social conformity, whatever. Like, because I don't think that was created just for people like, oh, we love each other and let's make a contract.
Yeah, the old has been based on religious beliefs, right?
Exactly.
You have to stay together because you can't get divorced. That's a lifetime thing, right? So social conditioning and shame, right? You can't fail. So what I see with this in my practice is I see people come in. I'm working with a man, he's probably in his 60s. I'm actually proud of him. It's taken a while. He came in because he had anxiety. He didn't know why he had anxiety, and then over time things unfold, right? So more recently, things finally start unfolding. And he's able to see, okay, I can see where my marriage got off track, where I had a belief, you know, we talk about, what do you think your purpose in this life is? Because everything goes back to what we value and what we think our purpose is. And some people don't even think about that. They're so wired for social conditioning that they're like, I don't know, to work and pay bills. And then they wonder why they're depressed when they no longer have to work but still have to pay bills because they retired or whatever, right? Well, social conditioning really doesn't give us a good justification as to why we're even here. Why do you guys think we're here? I mean, we don't know for sure, but it does drive our life. People who hold the belief that we're here to grow offer something, and that prevents their depression. So they believe that their purpose is to make this world a better place, whether it's part of their relationship, their parenting, the things that they offer to the world, their relationships. If you get stuck on, I just pay bills and I support my family, that's not going to bring you the level of satisfaction that you want. So people would stay together and they kind of became roommates for the most part. And what was lacking? Communication lacks. And so what a lot of women did was they built a life for themselves around their husbands. So suddenly there will be a house full of stuff and it'll look like they're hoarding. Well, what they did is they replaced the relationship with stuff. Sorry. No, that's okay. So they replaced the relationship that they desire because we're wired for connection with items. Or they may have replaced the relationship with friendships. And in the past, those friendships were, because people didn't know how to connect, those friendships were based on gossip or relating versus connecting. So they replaced the relationship with something. But they, as a result of shame, right? You don't want to fail. They would stay in the relationship. But is that relationship a success?
A successful dysfunction.
It's a successful dysfunction, yeah. It's not a success. So they might be celebrating 50th wedding anniversaries, but what are they really celebrating? Okay, we stayed together. Some people even had, a relationship on the side for years, and because they didn't want to get divorced, they stayed in that relationship and didn't address things. So it's all rooted in that avoidance, going off those tracks. So this was the norm for a long time. Had they communicated in an effective way, which I refer to as together, team, talk. Those things are lacking. So that started to move out, and then as all things, when we're trying to heal something as a society or individually, there's a pendulum swing. So it swings. And what has it swung to? It has swung to high divorce rates and new beliefs, mostly by women. It's single by choice, which is a defense. I am independent. I have to do it all myself. You don't value me. You don't appreciate me. And so we pendulum swung. I don't need a man, all that stuff, right? So it pendulum swung to this and created confusion. Both are confusion. This is confusion and this is confusion. So as with all things, when we heal it, it has to find a balance straight down to the middle. So what does the middle look like? Because I believe that that's what we're moving towards. So I think that this was the old model of relationships, according to history and anthropology and sociology. That appears to be the case. And then there's a gap generation. So then it pendulum swung. So our generation pendulum swung and did this. And now this new generation is trying to find a balance. And we are too, at some level. So we're kind of the gap generation between this and this if you're like age 35 to maybe 60, 65. So you might still believe this. You might believe this. And this is the fragmentation, right? That's the trauma. It's like, should I believe this or should I believe this? If I want to fit in with my female friends, I should probably believe that because they're like, you could go out with 5 guys. You could be single by choice. You can do whatever you want. We can all go on trips together, but they're not happy. And then they're not really happy here either because both are a disempowered state. So the balance is you can have a functional relationship. How do you do that? And you don't have to always change relationships. You can have a functional relationship. It can last a long time. You can reinvent it. But what are the ingredients for that? So you don't have to be single by choice. You don't have to be independent. You don't have to be codependent either because this is codependent. So there's a spectrum. Codependent, and this is like completely disengaged. Like I can do this all myself. So there's interdependence. That's where things have to be. You can be interdependent. So you can have a functional relationship. So what does a functional relationship look like? Well, together, team, talk. Right? We're together by choice. We choose to. We're not single by choice. We choose to be with someone because we're wired for connection. Our DNA is wired to belong. We're not meant to get through life all by ourselves and then play victim and martyr about it and be like, oh, I have been all by myself doing this all by myself. Nobody's been helping me. That's that track of victim mentality. When people start to form a team mentality, they recognize, okay, we do this together and we have to talk. Because I ask people that I work with, older couples, well, when do you think your relationship got off track? And they're like, oh, 10, 15 years ago. And then I say, well, what have you been doing for the last 10 or 15 years? Just staying in the same house? Just living separate lives, basically? And they're like, yeah, that is what we've been doing.
I've heard those stories.
Yeah. So I do believe that there can be a balance between those two. What are your thoughts? Do you believe that there can be a balance between those two?
Definitely a team playing work effort, you know what I mean? Like, it's not an easy thing. People that say in relationships are easy, they're not working at it. You know, like, I have a lot of uncles that was their belief, and now they don't have a wife anymore. You know, like.
Do they recognize it?
No, I believe they're all very stonewalled with their mentality. You know what I mean? Very stubborn, and it was her fault, and they don't want to take responsibility for their half of whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's common. Yeah, it's all her fault because she's not buying into this belief system that really allowed men to be in charge. And so, remember, we're trying to equalize power, voice, and value. That's not equalizing power, voice, and value. When you just build your life around somebody to try and find some level of autonomy, but yet that person still has control. And then you pendulum swing, so those women leave and they're like, I'm going to do this now. And that's not healthy either. So we have to discard those old belief systems in exchange for work. It is work.
So you had said the social conditioning. What part do you believe is where social conditioning leads to this, to that, you know, to the shame, to the codependency, to...
The root of it is hard to discern. It's hard to determine where exactly, you know, these beliefs originated from, but they seem to be rooted in a lot of religion.
That would be my best guess.
Mm-hmm. They do seem to be rooted in a lot of religion. Now, why people, you know, it could be that the people that, you know, took out parts of the Bible or rewrote parts of the Bible did so for their own benefit. And then it just propagated because they wanted to have 10 wives or they wanted to have certain things go their way. And then they, you know, could have started maybe with, like, let's say, like the Pharisees.
And starting with fear-based kind of...
Mm-hmm. Where they could justify, well, if I can change this doctrine to be, you know, this kind of says this kind of says that, kind of says it's okay to have 5 wives, kind of says it's okay to do X, Y, Z. And then that propagates, and we believe it because you add the fear element of somebody going to hell, and that scares people, right? And then people use it to make, you know, if it suits them, right? If it's somebody in a family and they're like, oh, this really suits me, I'm gonna really go with this one line. And if I can control other people using that one line, and I can keep my kids around, and I can keep my family members attached to me in an enmeshed way, then this really benefits me. So I can control other people. And then when people start to get more information and they're like, no, I don't like the way this feels. This doesn't feel good. But then they come here and they're like, well, I don't really like the way this feels either, because this was a whole big society, women's movement, pendulum swing, that all it did was add more to our plates. So now we're like, oh, we do everything. We have everything, but we also do everything, and as a result, you lose everything.
Oh, yeah,
because you lose your teammate.
You don't have anybody to share your life with. Right?
Yeah, you don't have anybody to share your successes with. You don't have anybody to share the journey with, the work with. But the reason people fear this balance so much is because it requires them to talk. And it requires them to talk about real things. And it requires them to be vulnerable, and that terrifies people. Being vulnerable terrifies people. Why do you think it terrifies people?
The vulnerability, just
Shows weakness. You have
Yeah.
to expose your weakness.
being embarrassed, being not worthy.
Yeah, I have a blog I was writing that the title is Jealousy and Negative, quote unquote, negative emotions look good on you. What do you think people would think if they saw that title in our society? They'd be like, what do you think they would think?
Like where? You hit like people here or like Australia?
Anywhere.
Maybe, like,
Well, in the
where's
United
that?
States, I mean, anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
because that social conditioning has spread across the world. I mean,
Yeah.
dysfunction exists across all planes, across all cultures. You know, that dysfunction exists everywhere. And so, looking at a title like that, what do you think people would default to? If it said, jealousy and quote unquote negative emotions look good on you. What do you think they would think? Without reading it, just looking at the title.
Just looking internally at it would first make you think cognitively about what, am I jealous and does it look good on me? Like, where's my jealousy, where's my envy, and how do I portray it?
Mm-hmm. What if I added the piece to that and denial and suppression don't? Because the statement so what you're doing is you're flipping it on its head, right? The statement in our society is jealousy doesn't look good on you. So what does that create? Because jealousy is an emotion in terms of what any human being experiences. They just do. So what does that tell people? It's gaslighting, and it says suppress that. It doesn't look good on you. So they suppress it, and they suppress it, and they suppress it, but it's there. And then they act out on it in their relationships. And then they're like, I don't want to be petty. I don't want to be selfish. So they'll come into counseling, and you can see right where the social conditioning comes in, because they finally feel safe to talk about it. And they'll say, I feel jealous that my husband's paying attention to some family member, let's say. But I don't want to feel, and then the but comes in. But I don't want to feel petty or selfish. That's petty or selfish, right? And then I say, I don't know, is it? Well, yeah, is what they say. And I say, according to who? Well, according to whoever. And I say, according to someone who's going to gaslight you if you say the truth. And they say, yeah. And I say, but are you jealous? Yeah. I say, have you talked to your partner about that? No, I just blow up. I become person Y and I just blow up. And then nobody knows why I'm blowing up, and I don't really even know why I'm blowing up. But jealousy is at the root of it. But you don't want to sound like you're controlling, petty, or selfish. And all of that is social conditioning, social conditioning, social conditioning. I don't want to be petty, jealous, or selfish. But why is it petty, jealous, or selfish to say how you really feel? I mean, if you're jealous, you're jealous. That's okay. That's a human emotion. So nothing leaves. What you resist persists, right? So if you keep resisting that jealousy and you don't talk about it, then all you're met with is more things to make you jealous because you're not addressing it. What would happen if that person was striving for this kind of a relationship and they went home and they said, you know what? I blew up the other day because I was jealous because you were paying attention to your sister and her problem, or your brother and his problem, and that was taken away from our family, and I felt abandoned because it's rooted in an abandonment wound. What would happen if that person went home and said that?
Probably cause disharmony.
It might, but it also leads to what? What does it lead to? What do you think it leads to?
Communication.
It leads to understanding, right? So then that person's like, oh, okay, now I know why you blew up. Now I know why you're upset. It leads to understanding. Might lead to conflict if somebody's really rooted here, right? Because they might say, how dare you challenge what I'm doing? I'm the one in charge. Or they might gaslight and say, oh my gosh, you're so dramatic. Why are you so dramatic? Why don't you just go focus on being happy? Why don't you focus on being grateful for the time I do give you? Right? How often do we hear those things? We hear them often. And so is that going to be welcoming for somebody who wants to be understood and talk about their jealousy? No. And then if you go to one of your friends and they're of this mindset and you're like, you know, my husband's been spending all this time with his family and I've been taking care of the kids and I feel jealous and I would like him to be home more and I'm trying to address it and he just told me to be grateful for the time that I do get and to stop being dramatic and causing fights. Then what are these friends going to say if they're of this mindset? Yep. Yeah. Girl, you should leave him. We're having all kinds of fun.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to put up with that shit. You could be over here, right? And then that person's like, okay, well, do I want to go home and deal with this? Or do I want to find an easy solution and deal with this? But what if the answer was we educated people about gaslighting and we educated people about understanding and validating people's feelings, and this person went home and said, you know, I've been feeling this way, and this person was also trying to find this balance and said, okay, I can see where that would make you jealous. I can see where if you have an abandonment wound, you would feel like you're being abandoned at this time and that I'm giving my energy to other things when you need that energy here. How can we work on that? How can maybe we find a balance where my family needs me at this time because maybe somebody's ill or maybe somebody has something going on, but I also know that you need me here. Those are mature conversations, right? People don't know how to have those mature conversations. It's like so short-sighted. It's like, well, I don't want to hear you. Shut up, basically, you bug. You're too much. You're causing drama. You just want to start arguments, and I'm just going to scapegoat you because I don't want to deal with this, and you're bringing a problem to me.